The girl stood on the auction block with eyes like winter storms, her spine rigid as steel despite the iron shackles that bit into her wrists, and Caleb Thornton knew in that moment he would empty his blood-money purse to buy her freedom, though he couldn't have said why. Caleb pulled his hat lower, a futile attempt to hide a face that adorned wanted posters from Missouri to the Arizona Territory. The saloon-turned-auction house stank of whiskey, sweat, and greed, familiar companions to a man who'd spent 15 years as the most feared bounty hunter west of the Mississippi. They called him the Reaper, for the trail of bodies he'd left in his wake, each one worth good coin to someone with enough hatred and resources to pay his price. "Next up, gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, his voice oily as snake medicine, "a fine specimen, girl of 14 summers, strong back, educated too, reads and writes better than most of you sorry lot." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Of miners, ranchers, and drifters. Starting bid is $50. 60, called a bearded man near the front, his eyes crawling over the girl like insects. 75, counted another. The girl's gaze remained fixed on some distant point beyond the saloon walls. Her dress was threadbare but clean, her dark hair falling in a single braid down her back. Even from 20 feet away, Caleb could see the bruises on her arms, the hollow of hunger in her cheeks. 100, Caleb said, his voice cutting through the din like a knife. The room quieted. Men turned to stare at the tall figure in the black duster, recognition dawning on their faces. The Reaper rarely showed himself in towns like Silver Creek, preferring to conduct his deadly business away from prying eyes. 100 from Mr. Thornton, the auctioneer said, nervousness making his voice tremble slightly. "Do I hear 125? The bearded man who'd opened the bidding turned, took one look at Caleb's cold eyes, and shook his head minutely. No one else spoke up. "Sold then to Mr. Thornton for $100. Caleb approached the auction block, counting out gold pieces from a leather pouch. The transaction complete, the auctioneer gestured for an assistant to remove the girl's shackles. "She's all yours," the man said, pushing the girl forward. "Though I can't imagine what a man of your profession wants with a child." Caleb ignored him, turning instead to the girl, who now stood before him, rubbing her raw wrists. Up close, her eyes were even more striking, grey as gunmetal, with flecks of blue that reminded him of the mountain lakes of his youth. "What's your name, girl?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Eleanor," she replied, her voice stronger than he'd expected. "Eleanor Walsh." Walsh. The name struck a chord in Caleb's memory, but he couldn't place it. "Come with me," he said, turning toward the door. "Unless you'd rather stay." It was a test of sorts. The girl, Eleanor, narrowed her eyes, studying him with an intensity that surprised him. "I'll come," she said finally, "though I can't imagine your intentions are any nobler than theirs." A flicker of amusement crossed Caleb's face. There, and gone like summer lightning. "Smart to be suspicious," he acknowledged, "but you've nothing to fear from me." Outside, the mountain town of Silver Creek sprawled beneath a sky heavy with the promise of snow. November had painted the surrounding peaks white, and the wind carried the bite of the coming winter. Caleb led Eleanor to the livery where his horse, a massive black stallion named Judas, waited. The animal snorted at their approach, pawing the ground impatiently. "Can you ride?" Caleb asked, reaching for the saddle. "Yes." "Good. We've a ways to go before nightfall." Eleanor watched him with those storm-cloud eyes. "Where are you taking me?" "Away from here," Caleb replied, tightening. "Judas's cinch. Beyond that, I haven't decided." "You spent $100 without a plan." Caleb turned to face her fully. "I spent $100 to keep you off that block. What happens next is up to you, in part." Eleanor considered this, suspicion warring with a desperate hope in her expression. "My father is dead," she said abruptly. "They killed him 3 weeks ago. Came to our homestead in the night." "Who did?" "Men working for Silas Montgomery." The name hit Caleb like a physical blow. Montgomery, the cattle baron who controlled 3 territories with money, fear, and a private army of hired guns. The man whose gold had filled Caleb's pockets more than once. "Why would Montgomery want your father dead?" Caleb asked carefully. "Water rights. Our land controls the headwaters of the Red Canyon River. Father wouldn't sell." Eleanor's voice remained steady, though her hands had curled into fists at her sides. "They shot him while he slept, then burned our house with him in it. I only escaped because I was gathering herbs in the woods." The pieces were assembling themselves in Caleb's mind now. Walsh, Joshua Walsh, the stubborn homesteader whose elimination Montgomery had discussed hiring Caleb for last spring. Caleb had turned down the job, not out of any moral qualm, but because the price hadn't been right. Apparently Montgomery had found someone with fewer scruples or lower rates. "And how did you end up on that auction block?" Caleb asked, though he could guess. "Montgomery's men caught me 3 days later, said a girl with no family and no home belonged to whoever was willing to pay." A bitter smile twisted Eleanor's lips. "I suppose that's you now." Caleb finished saddling Judas, then turned back to Eleanor. "No," he said firmly, "you don't belong to anyone." Skepticism flashed across her face. "Then why buy me?" It was a fair question, one Caleb wasn't entirely sure he could answer. Something about her defiance in the face of such cruel circumstances had stirred memories he'd thought long buried, of another child, another time, another failure. "Let's just say I've got a debt to settle," he replied enigmatically, offering his hand to help her mount. Eleanor ignored his outstretched palm, pulling herself into the saddle with surprising grace. "I don't trust you," she stated flatly. "Good," Caleb said, swinging up behind her. "Trust gets people killed in this world." As they rode out of Silver Creek, the first snowflakes began to fall, dusting their shoulders and melting against the warmth of Judas's flanks. Neither of them noticed the man watching from the shadows beside the general store, nor saw him mount his own horse to follow at a discreet distance. The man's instructions from Silas Montgomery had been clear. Find the Walsh girl. His employer would be very interested to learn that the infamous Reaper had just purchased the daughter of his enemy. They rode until dusk, painted the mountains purple against the darkening sky. Caleb kept to game trails and shallow creek beds, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The snow had stopped, but the temperature continued to drop, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Eleanor sat rigidly before him, neither complaining nor attempting conversation. Her fortitude impressed him, though he kept the thought. To himself, "There's a line shack about a mile ahead," Caleb finally said, breaking the hours-long silence. "We'll stop there for the night." Eleanor nodded once, the only indication she'd heard him. The shack materialized like a ghost in the twilight, a crude structure of rough-hewn logs with a sagging roof and a single smoke-blackened window. Caleb dismounted first, scanning the area before helping Eleanor down. "Wait here," he instructed, drawing his Colt revolver before approaching the cabin. Inside, he found only dust and abandoned mouse nests. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a narrow cot with a straw mattress occupied another. Whoever had built the place had left it long ago, though occasional travelers had clearly used it since. When he returned to Eleanor, she had already unsaddled Judas and was rubbing the horse down with a handful of dry grass. "Good with horses," Caleb observed. "My father bred them," she replied without looking up, "before the drought came and we had to sell most of our stock." Caleb nodded, taking Judas's reins and leading him to a lean-to beside the cabin. Once the horse was settled with a measure of oats from Caleb's saddlebags, he returned to find Eleanor gathering firewood from a pile near the shack's entrance. Inside, Caleb built a fire, while Eleanor perched on the edge of the cot, watching him warily. The dancing flames cast moving shadows across her face, making her seem older than her 14 years. "You should eat," Caleb said, offering jerky and hardtack from his provisions. Eleanor accepted the food silently, her hunger apparently overcoming her distrust. "Why did you really buy me?" she asked abruptly, after finishing her meager meal. "And don't give me that nonsense about debts again." Caleb leaned back against the wall, his face half in shadow. "You remind me of someone," he admitted, surprising himself with the truth. "Who?" "My sister. She would have been about your age now." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Would have been. She died, along with my parents. Farm raid." Caleb's voice remained flat, emotionless. "I was 15, out hunting. Came back to find them all dead." "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, with what sounded like genuine sympathy. Caleb shrugged. "It was a long time ago. Is that why you became a bounty hunter? Revenge?" At first, Caleb poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks spiral up the chimney. "Found I had a talent for hunting men. Paid better than farm work." Eleanor studied him with those unsettling grey eyes. "They say you've killed over 100 men. People talk too much. Is it true?" Caleb met her gaze across the fire. "I stopped counting at 50. The girl absorbed this information without visible reaction. "And you've worked for Silas Montgomery before." It wasn't a question. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "How would you know that?" "I heard my father talking about you once. Said Montgomery had hired the Reaper to intimidate some homesteaders up north." She tilted her head slightly. "He said you were the devil's own shadow." A humorless smile touched Caleb's lips. "Your father had a way with words. He was a good man," Eleanor said fiercely. "He believed in something, unlike you." The accusation hung in the air between them, alongside the smoke from the fire. Caleb said nothing, recognizing the truth in her words. "What will you do with me?" Eleanor asked after a long silence. "Take you somewhere safe. A town called Redemption. About 3 days' ride from here. There's a woman there, Martha Oakes. She runs a boarding house for girls. You'll have a roof, food, schooling." "And then what?" "You salve your conscience and ride away." Caleb's expression hardened. "This isn't about conscience, girl. I've done what I've done. No amount of good deeds changes that." "Then why help me at all?" Before Caleb could answer, Judas whinnied from the lean-to, a warning sound that made the bounty hunter's hand instinctively move to his gun. "Stay here," he ordered, rising smoothly to his feet, "and douse that light." Eleanor moved without question, throwing a blanket over the fire while Caleb slipped to the window. Outside, the moonlight reflected off the snow, creating an eerie half-light that turned the landscape into a monochrome painting. For a long moment he saw nothing. Then a shadow moved between the trees. "Someone followed us," Caleb whispered, drawing his Colt. "Get under the cot. Now." Eleanor obeyed, sliding beneath the low frame as Caleb positioned himself beside the door. Seconds stretched into minutes, the only sound their controlled breathing and the occasional restless movement from Judas outside. The cabin door exploded inward with a crash. Caleb fired immediately, the muzzle flash illuminating a bearded face. For a split second before the man crumpled, a second figure appeared in the doorway, and Caleb's gun barked again. The man staggered but didn't fall, returning fire wildly. Caleb felt the hot kiss of a bullet grazing his arm before his third shot found its mark. Silence fell, broken only by the dying wheeze of one of the attackers. "Stay down," Caleb ordered Eleanor, moving cautiously to check the bodies. The first man was dead, a bullet hole centered in his forehead. The second still breathed, blood bubbling from a chest wound. Caleb recognized him, Harlan Vick, a two-bit gun-for-hire who occasionally did dirty work for Montgomery. "Who sent you?" Caleb demanded, kneeling beside the dying man. Vick coughed, blood speckling his lips. "You know damn well." "Who?" "Montgomery." A ghastly smile spread across Vick's face. "He wants the girl." "Why?" "She's just a homesteader's daughter," Vic's laugh turned into a gurgling cough. That what? She told you? His eyes flicked to where Eleanor remained, hidden under the cot. Ask her about her mother. The man's eyes glazed over, his final breath rattling in his throat. Caleb turned slowly to face Eleanor, who had crawled out from her hiding place. Her face was pale in the moonlight streaming through the broken door, but her expression remained defiant. "What was he talking about?" Caleb asked quietly. Eleanor's chin lifted slightly. "My mother was Silas Montgomery's sister." The revelation hit Caleb like a physical blow. "Montgomery is your uncle?" "Yes." Eleanor's voice was steady. "And he's been trying to kill me since the day I was born." Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the corners of the line shack like lost souls seeking shelter. Judas stomped nervously in his makeshift shelter, sensing the tension that now filled the cabin. "You should have told me," Caleb said finally. "Would it have mattered?" Eleanor challenged. "Would you have still helped me if you'd known the whole truth?" Caleb had no answer for her. The night stretched cold and dark before them, and Montgomery's men were surely not far behind. Dawn broke grey and grudging, the mountains shrouded in mist that clung to the pines like ghostly fingers. Caleb had spent the night disposing of the bodies, dragging them far into the forest where scavengers would make short work of the evidence, while Eleanor slept fitfully on the cot. Now, as first light filtered through the broken door, Caleb studied the girl with new eyes. The family resemblance was there if you knew to look for it. Something in the proud set of her jaw that echoed Silas Montgomery's infamous stubbornness. "Tell me everything," he said, passing her a tin cup of coffee boiled over the rekindled fire. "And no more half-truths." Eleanor wrapped her thin fingers around the cup, seeming to draw strength from its warmth. "My mother was Catherine Montgomery, the only daughter in a family of sons. Silas was the eldest. I know the Montgomery clan by reputation." Caleb nodded. "Old Texas money that moved west after the war. Built an empire on cattle and other peoples. Misfortune. My mother was different," Eleanor continued. "She had ideas about equality, about workers' rights. The family sent her east to school, hoping to marry her off to some banker or politician. Instead, she met my father at a lecture about land reform." "Joshua Walsh," Caleb supplied. "Yes, he was nobody, just a farmer's son with dreams of having his own homestead, but he believed in the same things she did." A small, sad smile touched Eleanor's lips. "They eloped. The Montgomerys disowned her completely." Caleb leaned against the rough wall, listening intently. "That doesn't explain why Silas would want you dead. Family feuds run deep, but blood is blood." Eleanor's gaze dropped to the cup in her hands. "My mother kept journals, detailed accounts of Montgomery corruption, bribes paid to judges, arrangements with rustlers to eliminate competition, even murders ordered by Silas himself. And you have these journals." "I did. They were hidden in a false bottom of my mother's hope chest. When our house burned," she shook her head, "I thought they were destroyed. But you read them. You know what's in them." Eleanor nodded grimly. Every word, names, dates, amounts paid, enough to hang Silas and his brothers 10 times over. Understanding dawned on Caleb's face. "You're not just a reminder of his sister's betrayal. You're a witness. One he can't afford to let live," Eleanor confirmed, "especially now that my father is gone." Caleb pushed away from the wall, pacing the small confines of the cabin. "Montgomery won't stop coming. Those men last night were just the beginning." "I know. The smart play would be to cut you loose, ride away." Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact, without cruelty. "It's what I would have done before." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "And now?" Before Caleb could answer, Judas whinnied again from outside. Not the sharp warning of last night, but a greeting. Caleb's hand went to his gun as he moved swiftly to the window. "Someone's coming," he said, tension evident in every line of his. "A body. Just one rider. More of Montgomery's men?" Caleb squinted through the dirty glass. "No, it's a woman." He stepped outside, gun still drawn, as a copper-haired woman on a dappled mare approached the cabin. She reined in at the sight of Caleb, her hand hovering near what he suspected was a hidden weapon. "Thornton," she said by way of greeting, "wasn't expecting to find you here." "Mackenzie." Caleb nodded cautiously. "Long way from your usual hunting grounds." Rose Mackenzie was a bounty hunter like himself, though she specialized in bringing in fugitives alive, a trait that earned her less money but more respect among lawmen. They had crossed paths occasionally over the years, maintaining a wary professional courtesy. "I could say the same for you," Rose replied, dismounting smoothly. Her gaze shifted to the cabin door where Eleanor now stood. "And with company, no less." "What brings you here, Rose?" Caleb asked, ignoring her observation. "Tracking some men who robbed the Silver Creek Bank 2 days ago." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't happen to have seen them. 2 fellows, one tall with a beard, the other shorter with a nasty scar across his chin. Can't say that I have." Caleb's expression remained neutral. Rose's gaze traveled to the broken door of the cabin, the faint bloodstains still visible on the threshold. "Seems you had visitors of your own." "Nothing I couldn't handle." A smile touched Rose's lips. "Never doubted it." She turned her attention fully to Eleanor. "And who might you be, child?" Before Eleanor could answer, Caleb stepped. "Between them, she's under my protection. That's all you need to know." Something like surprise flickered across Rose's face. The Reaper taking in strays. "Now I've seen everything." "We all have our moments of weakness," Caleb replied dryly. Rose studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "Well, whatever your business is, you should know there's a sizable bounty being offered in Silver Creek. $20,000 for the return of a girl matching your young friend's description." She nodded toward Eleanor. "Dead or alive?" Eleanor paled, but her expression remained defiant. "Who's offering?" Caleb asked, though he already knew the answer. "Silas Montgomery himself, claiming she's his runaway niece, unstable and dangerous." Rose's knowing look made it clear she doubted this story. Half the bounty hunters in the territory would be looking for her by sundown. Caleb cursed under his breath. $20,000 would draw attention they couldn't afford. "I appreciate the warning," he said finally. Rose nodded, remounting her mare. "One more thing," she added, gathering the reins. "Montgomery's brought in special help. Jensen Cole." The name sent a chill through Caleb that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Cole was a legend in their profession, a man who never failed to bring in his target, usually in pieces. "How long do we have?" Caleb asked. "He arrived in Silver Creek yesterday." Rose's expression softened slightly as she looked at Eleanor. "Whatever she did to earn Montgomery's wrath, I hope it was worth it." With that, she wheeled her horse around and rode away, disappearing into the mist as suddenly as she had appeared. Caleb turned to Eleanor, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "You know who Jensen Cole is?" She nodded slowly. "My father once said he was worse than the Reaper. At least you killed quickly." Caleb grimaced. "We need to move, now." As they hurriedly packed their meager belongings, Eleanor paused, fixing Caleb with those storm-grey eyes. "You never answered my question. Would you still have helped me if you'd known the truth from the beginning?" Caleb secured his saddlebags before replying. "A month ago? No. I'd have collected Montgomery's bounty without a second thought." He checked his ammunition, reloading the spent chambers from the night's encounter. "But now, let's just say I've got my own score to settle with Silas Montgomery." "What did he do to you?" Caleb's expression darkened. He hired me to kill a man named Thomas Miller last year. Said Miller was rustling his cattle. After I did the job, I found out Miller was just a homesteader who'd refused to sell his land. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. Like my father. Like your father, Caleb confirmed grimly. Montgomery's been playing men like me for years, turning us into his personal executioners. He finished checking his weapons and looked up. It stops now. Outside, the mist was beginning to burn off, revealing a sky heavy with the promise of more snow. They would leave tracks that even a novice could follow, let alone a hunter of Jensen Cole's caliber. But for the first time in years, Caleb Thornton wasn't running from something. He was running toward it. Afternoon found them high in the mountains, following a narrow game trail that snaked between towering pines. Snow had begun falling again, fat flakes that melted against Judas's steaming flanks, but accumulated rapidly on the ground. Their tracks would be covered, but progress would slow. "We need to find shelter before nightfall," Caleb said, surveying the darkening sky. "Storms coming in faster than I thought." Eleanor nodded, huddled in Caleb's spare coat. Despite her stoic demeanor, he could see exhaustion etching lines around her young eyes. "There's an old mining camp about 2 miles ahead," he continued, "abandoned when the silver played out. Should have solid buildings, maybe supplies." "How do you know these mountains so well?" Eleanor asked. "Tracked a man through here 3 years back. Deserter turned murderer. Holed up in that mining camp for a week before I found him." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Did you kill him?" "Yes." Caleb's voice was matter of fact. He'd killed 4 people, including a child. They rode in silence after that. The only sounds, the creaking of leather and Judas's labored breathing as he navigated the increasingly treacherous trail. The mining camp appeared like a mirage through the thickening snow, a collection of weathered wooden structures clinging to the mountainside. Most had collapsed under the weight of previous winters, but 3 buildings remained relatively intact: a cookhouse, a bunkhouse, and what appeared to be an office or storehouse. Caleb chose the storehouse, its stone foundation and sturdy walls, offering the best protection from both elements and potential attackers. A rusted cast-iron stove squatted in one corner, its chimney pipe disappearing through the roof. "Get a fire started," Caleb instructed, unsaddling Judas. "I'll check the perimeter." By the time he returned, Eleanor had coaxed the ancient stove to life, feeding it splinters of wood from a broken shelf. The weak flames cast dancing shadows across the room, illuminating dust-covered shelves and abandoned mining equipment. "Found these," Caleb said, dropping several cans on a rickety table. The labels had long since faded, their contents a mystery. Better than nothing. Using his hunting knife, he pried open one can to reveal peaches preserved in syrup, their color dulled but still edible. Another contained beans. They ate in silence, the howling wind and crackling fire, the only sounds. "What's your plan?" Eleanor finally asked, scraping the last of the peaches from her can. "We can't keep running forever." Caleb stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. "No, we can't. So we stop running." Caleb met her gaze. "We take the fight to Montgomery." Eleanor's eyes widened. "That's suicide. He has an army of hired guns, properties across 3 territories. We're just what? A killer and a girl?" Caleb's mouth twisted in a grim smile. "Sometimes that's enough." "You have a specific plan in mind," Eleanor observed, studying him closely. "I might." Caleb reached into his coat, withdrawing a folded piece of paper. "This arrived by special courier 3 days before I found you on that auction block. Seems your uncle has more enemies than friends these days." He passed the paper to Eleanor, who unfolded it carefully. Her eyes widened as she read. "This is a contract," she breathed, "for Montgomery's death." $50,000, Caleb confirmed. Offered by a consortium of ranchers and homesteaders who've suffered under his expansion. Eleanor looked up sharply. You were already hunting him. I was considering it. Is that why you were in Silver Creek, looking for a way to get to Montgomery? Caleb nodded slowly. Your appearance complicated things, made them personal. And now we have leverage. You. Caleb leaned forward, his eyes intense in the firelight. Montgomery wants you dead because you know too much. We use that, draw him out. Eleanor's face paled. You want to use me as bait. I want to use you as a witness. The journals may be gone, but you read them. You know names, dates, crimes committed. Enough to hang Montgomery if you testified before a federal judge. No judge would take the word of a 14-year-old girl over Silas Montgomery's. They would if we had proof. Caleb's expression was calculating. Montgomery keeps records of his own. Detailed ledgers of every transaction, legal or otherwise. It's how men like him maintain control. They know exactly who they've paid, threatened, or killed. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. And you think we can get these records? I know we can, because I know where he keeps them. The stove popped and hissed as a piece of resinous wood caught fire. Outside, the storm had intensified, snow and wind combining in a white fury that erased the world beyond their shelter. How would you know that? Eleanor asked suspiciously. Because Montgomery tried to hire me to kill the last man who got too close to those ledgers. A U.S. Marshal named Harding. Caleb's expression darkened. I refused the job. Montgomery sent Jensen Cole instead, and this Marshal Harding. They found pieces of him across 3 counties. Caleb's voice was flat. But before he died, he told someone what he'd discovered, someone he trusted. Who? Rose Mackenzie. Eleanor's eyes widened. The woman from this morning. She knows about the ledgers. She knows where they're kept. In a safe, behind a painting, in Montgomery's study at the White Pine Ranch. Caleb's gaze was steady, and she knows the combination. Why would she tell you that? Because Rose and Harding were more than colleagues. She wants Montgomery to pay for what he did. Caleb leaned, back stretching his shoulders, and she knew our paths would cross eventually. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, processing this information. So your plan is to break into the most heavily guarded ranch in the territory, steal Montgomery's secret ledgers, and then, what, take them to a judge? Something like that. That's insane. Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. We'd never get within a mile of those ledgers. Montgomery has dozens of men guarding that ranch. He does, Caleb agreed. But there's one thing that might get us past them. What's that? Caleb's smile was cold as the storm outside. You, his long-lost niece, returning to claim her birthright. The implications hung in the air between them, competing with the smoke from the ancient stove. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the building's timbers. You want me to pretend I've turned against you, Eleanor said slowly, to make Montgomery believe I'm willing to side with him. It's the only way we get close enough. And if he doesn't believe me, if he just decides to kill me on sight? Caleb's expression hardened. Then I'll kill him first, and every man between us and those ledgers. Eleanor studied him, her grey eyes reflecting the firelight. You've changed your mind about killing, then? No, Caleb replied honestly. Just about who deserves killing. As if punctuating his words, a massive gust of wind struck the building, sending a shower of snow down the stovepipe and causing the flames to sputter momentarily. In that brief darkness, Eleanor's face seemed to age, childhood falling away like a discarded mask. When do we start? She asked. Tomorrow, Caleb said, if the storm breaks. But as the night deepened and the blizzard intensified, neither of them noticed the lone figure who had followed their tracks to the abandoned mining camp nor heard the soft crunch of footsteps circling their shelter. Seeking entry points and weaknesses, Jensen Cole had found his prey. The attack came just before dawn. Caleb woke instantly at the sound of breaking glass, a bottle thrown through one of the boarded windows, its contents igniting as it shattered. Against the far wall, fire bloomed, hungry flames licking at the dry timber. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing Eleanor's arm and pulling her toward the door. They were halfway across the room when the door exploded inward, kicked off its rusted hinges. A massive figure filled the doorway, backlit by the pale glow of pre-dawn, reflected off snow. Even in silhouette, Caleb recognized the distinctive broad-brimmed hat and long duster, Jensen Cole. The bounty hunter's first shot caught Caleb in the shoulder, spinning him around. His second would have ended the fight if Eleanor hadn't hurled one of the empty peach cans, disrupting Cole's aim just enough to send the bullet splintering into the wall instead of Caleb's skull. Ignoring the fire spreading rapidly along one wall, Caleb rolled behind a heavy wooden desk, drawing his Colt as he moved. He fired twice, forcing Cole to duck back outside. "The back window," Caleb hissed to Eleanor, who had taken cover behind the cast-iron stove. "Go, now." "Not without you," she insisted, her face streaked with soot but determined. "Ain't that touching?" drawled a new voice from the shattered window. "The Reaper's got himself a conscience." A second figure appeared at the window, rifle aimed steadily at Eleanor. Caleb recognized him as one of Montgomery's regular hired guns, a man called Brenner, with a reputation for cruelty. They were surrounded. "Send." "Out the girl, Thornton," Cole called from outside the door. "Montgomery wants her alive if possible, but dead'll do. You, on the other hand, he wants pieces of you spread from here to Texas." Caleb's mind raced, assessing options that dwindled. By the second, as the fire consumed more of the building, smoke was filling the room, making it hard to see, hard to breathe. "There's another way," he called back, playing for time. "Montgomery's offering $20,000 for the girl. I've got a contract worth $50,000 for Montgomery's head. We could partner up, Cole, take the bigger prize." A cold laugh answered him. "And trust the Reaper at my back? I don't think so." The momentary distraction was all Caleb needed. In one fluid motion, he fired twice at Brenner, catching the man in the chest. As Brenner fell, Caleb lunged toward Eleanor, grabbed her arm, and pulled her toward the growing flames at the back of the building. "What are you doing?" she cried, struggling against his grip. "Trust me," Caleb gritted out, blood seeping from his shoulder wound. "When I say now, run straight through the fire to the wall behind it. We'll burn! Better than what Cole will do to us." Caleb's eyes were intense. "The back wall is rotten. One good hit, and we're through." Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. She nodded once, bracing herself. Outside, they heard Cole ordering his remaining men to surround the building. "Now," Caleb shouted, wrapping his duster around Eleanor as they charged through the flames. The impact with the weakened wall was jarring, but the water-rotted wood gave way, spilling them into the snow beyond. They tumbled down a short embankment, the cold shocking after the intense heat of the fire. Gunshots rang out as Cole's men spotted their escape. Caleb pulled Eleanor to her feet, and they ran, half sliding down the steep slope behind the mining camp. Judas was still tethered where Caleb had left him, stomping nervously at the commotion. "Get on," Caleb ordered, boosting Eleanor into the saddle before swinging up behind her, his wounded shoulder screaming in protest. They galloped down the mountain trail as dawn broke across the snow-covered peaks, painting them blood red. Behind them, Cole and his men would be mounting up, preparing to give chase. They had minutes at most. "We can't outrun them," Eleanor said, her voice raised against the wind of their passage. "Not with Judas carrying double." Caleb knew she was right. The stallion was strong, but even he had limits. Already his gait was labored in the deep snow. "We're not trying to outrun them," Caleb replied grimly. "Just need to reach the canyon." Red Canyon loomed ahead, its sheer walls rising like fortress ramparts on either side of the trail. In summer, the river that had carved it ran swift and deadly. In winter, it narrowed to a treacherous channel bordered by ice. "What's the plan?" Eleanor asked as they entered the canyon, the walls closing in around them. "Something suicidal," Caleb admitted. He pulled Judas to a halt near a cluster of boulders, dismounting painfully. "Get down! We make our stand here." Eleanor slid from the saddle, her face pale but determined. "Two against how many?" "Cole usually works with 3 men. We got 1 back at the camp, so him and 2 others." Caleb checked his remaining ammunition, 6 shots in the Colt, plus a dozen more in his belt. The wound in his shoulder made his left arm nearly useless, blood freezing on his sleeve in the bitter cold. "That's still 3-2, Eleanor pointed out. Caleb managed a grim smile. "Then we'll just have to be 3 times as good." They didn't have long to wait. The thunder of approaching hooves echoed off the canyon walls, followed by the appearance of 3 riders rounding the bend. Cole led them, his massive frame unmistakable even at a distance. "Take cover," Caleb ordered, positioning himself behind a boulder. "Don't shoot until I give the word." Eleanor crouched behind a nearby rock, clutching the small derringer Caleb had given her from his boot holster. It held only 2 shots, but at close range, it would be lethal enough. Cole and his men drew rein about 50 yards away, assessing the situation. With the canyon walls on either side and the partially frozen river behind them, Caleb and Eleanor were effectively trapped. "Thornton," Cole called, his voice carrying easily in the cold air. "This ends now. Send out the girl, and I'll make it quick for you." "Come and get her!" Caleb shouted back. Cole signaled to his men, one dismounted, moving to flank their position from the right, while the other stayed mounted, rifle at the ready. Cole himself remained centered on the trail, drawing a massive Remington revolver. "Remember," Caleb whispered to Eleanor, "wait for my signal." The first shot came from the mounted man, his rifle cracking like a whip in the confined space. The bullet ricocheted off stone inches from Caleb's head, showering him with fragments. Caleb returned fire, catching the rifleman in the chest. The man toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. The flanking man opened fire from behind a boulder 20 yards to their right. Eleanor ducked as bullets whined overhead, striking sparks from the rocks around them. "Now!" Caleb shouted, standing to fire 3 rapid shots at the flanker. The man cried out, clutching his arm, his gun falling into the snow. Before he could recover, Eleanor stood and fired her derringer. The small gun made a sound like a firecracker, but the effect was devastating at that range. The man fell backwards, a red blossom spreading across his chest. Cole, seeing his men fall, spurred his horse forward, firing as he came. Caleb felt a bullet graze his thigh, another punch through the flesh of his already wounded shoulder. He staggered, falling to one knee. "Caleb!" Eleanor cried, moving toward him. "Stay back!" he ordered, raising his Colt for one final shot. Cole was almost upon them, his massive horse plowing through the snow when the sound of a rifle shot echoed from further up the canyon. Cole jerked violently, then toppled from his saddle, landing heavily in the snow 10 feet from where Caleb knelt. Silence fell, broken only by the nervous whinnying of Cole's riderless horse. "What happened?" Eleanor whispered, her eyes wide. Before Caleb could answer, a familiar figure emerged from behind a rock outcropping further up the trail. Rose Mackenzie approached carefully, her rifle still trained on Cole's motionless form. "Thought you might need some help," she said, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Caleb struggled to his feet, blood dripping steadily from his wounds. "How? Did you find us?" "Wasn't hard. The fire at the mining camp was visible for miles." Rose nodded toward Cole. "Besides, I've been tracking him since Silver Creek. Figured he'd lead me to you." Eleanor emerged from cover, her small derringer still clutched in her hand. "Why help us?" Rose's expression softened slightly. "Let's just say I owe Caleb a favor, And I've got no love for Montgomery or his hired killers. Caleb swayed, the blood loss and cold beginning to take their toll. Eleanor moved to support him, her slight frame surprisingly strong under his weight. "He needs a doctor," she said to Rose, concern evident in her voice. "Nearest one's in Redemption, 2 days' ride in good weather." Rose glanced at the sky, which was darkening again with the promise of more snow. "We need to move fast." As they prepared to leave, Caleb paused by Jensen Cole's body. The infamous bounty hunter stared sightlessly at the canyon sky, his reputation ended by a bullet from a rival's gun. There was a certain poetry to it that wasn't lost on Caleb. "What now?" Eleanor asked as Rose helped Caleb mount behind her on Judas. "Now we stick to the plan," Caleb replied, his voice weak but determined. "White Pine Ranch, Montgomery's ledgers." Rose mounted her own horse, leading Coles as a spare. "You're in no condition for that, Thornton." "Doesn't matter," Caleb gritted through clenched teeth. "Montgomery won't stop, not while Eleanor lives, not while I live." Rose studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "White Pine Ranch it is, but we do it my way." She turned to Eleanor. "Your uncle's holding a gathering tomorrow night. Cattle buyers from as far as Chicago. The house will be full of guests." "Perfect. Cover for us to slip in." "And the ledgers?" Caleb asked, fighting to stay conscious as they rode out of the canyon. Still where Harding said they'd be, behind the painting in Montgomery's study. "But we'll need a distraction." Rose's gaze settled on Eleanor. "Something that will draw every eye in the room." Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. "The prodigal niece returns." "Exactly." Rose smiled grimly. "Montgomery won't dare make a scene in front of his business associates. You'll buy us the time we need." As they made camp that night in a sheltered grove, Caleb's wounds roughly bandaged with strips torn from Rose's spare shirt, Eleanor sat beside him while Rose kept watch. "Why did you really save me that day?" Eleanor asked softly. "The truth." This time, Caleb was silent for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "When I was 15, I couldn't save my sister from men like Montgomery, but I could save you." His eyes, fever-bright, in the firelight, met hers. "Maybe that's worth something in the end." Eleanor took his calloused hand in hers. "It's worth everything." As dawn broke over the mountains, 3 riders emerged from the wilderness. A wounded bounty hunter, a determined young girl, and a woman with vengeance in her heart. All bound for a reckoning that had been years in the making. The most feared man in the West had found something worth fighting for beyond blood money, and Silas Montgomery was about to learn the true price of his sins.